Maria's voice cut through the kitchen noise as she balanced 3 plates with the practiced ease of someone who'd been doing this for years. Table 9 needs more bread, and your regular at 14 is asking for you again. I looked up from polishing wine glasses, my stomach doing that familiar flutter it always did, when Dominic Salvatore requested my section. 3 months he'd been coming here, and I still couldn't figure out why a man who clearly had better places to be chose to spend his Thursday nights at Cielo d'Oro. He tips well, Maria continued, nudging me with her elbow. And those eyes. Dio mio. What's the problem? The problem was that everything about Dominic Salvatore set off alarm bells in my head. Not the kind that screamed danger, well, not entirely, but the kind that whispered secrets. My degree in forensic psychology had trained me to read people, to spot the micro-expressions and behavioral patterns that most missed, and Dominic had patterns written all over him in a language I was still trying to decode. No problem, I lied, smoothing down my burgundy apron and checking my reflection in the stainless steel surface of the espresso machine. My dark hair was still neatly twisted into its usual work bun, though a few strands had escaped during the dinner rush. At 27, I'd learned to present a competent, professional image, essential in New York's high-end restaurant scene, where your income depended on people trusting you enough to spend obscene amounts of money. The dining room hummed with Thursday night energy, couples celebrating promotions, business associates finalizing deals over wine that cost more than my monthly rent, groups of friends pretending the world outside wasn't falling apart. I'd become an expert at reading the social dynamics, understanding the power structures that played out across white tablecloths and flickering candlelight. Tonight, though, something felt different. I'd first noticed it around 8:30 when Marcus, one of our line cooks, had emerged from the kitchen with shoulders too tense for someone who'd just finished prep. He'd positioned himself near the pass-through window, watching the dining room with the kind of focused attention that didn't match his usual distracted efficiency. More concerning was his interaction with Gianna, the server who'd started 2 weeks ago. She'd approached him 3 times in the past hour, each conversation brief and hushed. Each time, Marcus had glanced toward table 14, Dominic's usual spot, with an expression I recognized from my behavioral studies, guilt mixed with determination. The face people made when they were about to do something they knew was wrong but had convinced themselves was necessary. Then there was the way Gianna kept adjusting her apron. Repetitive, self-soothing behavior. Her breathing was elevated. I could see it in the rapid rise and fall of her shoulders. And when she picked up plates from the expo line, her hands trembled just slightly. Not enough for customers to notice, but enough for someone trained in threat assessment to catalog. My psychology background had taught me to recognize pre-action anxiety, the physiological responses people exhibited before committing significant acts, elevated cortisol levels, manifesting in nervous gestures, hypervigilance, rapid breathing. Gianna was displaying every single marker. Earth to Sophie. Maria's voice cut through my analysis. Your mysterious Italian is waiting. I grabbed the bottle of Barolo. Dominic always ordered a vintage that cost more than I made in 3 days, and approached table 14. He looked up as I neared, those dark espresso eyes conducting their usual assessment. Everything about Dominic Salvatore was controlled, calculated, from the precise Windsor knot of his tie to the way he positioned his silverware. 6'3" of carefully contained power, wrapped in custom Italian tailoring. Good evening, Mr. Salvatore, I said, proud that my voice betrayed none of the unease building in my chest. The usual tonight, Sophie. That accent definitely northern Italy, probably Milan. It carried a net undertone of authority that made even simple requests sound like commands. And perhaps your recommendation for the secondo. As I poured his wine, I found myself cataloging details I'd been unconsciously collecting for months. How he always sat facing the entrance, back to the wall. The way his eyes continuously swept the room in careful patterns. The expensive watch he checked with military precision. The subtle bulge beneath his left shoulder that suggested either an unusually thick wallet or something more concerning. "The chef prepared osso buco tonight," I said, setting down the bottle. "It's exceptional." "Then I'll trust your judgment." I should have walked away, should have placed his order and returned to my other tables. Instead, I found myself watching Gianna approach the expo line for the 4th time in an hour. This time, she didn't just speak to Marcus. She leaned in close, whispered something that made his jaw tighten, then picked up a plate that had been sitting under the heat lamps for exactly 3 minutes. I'd timed it unconsciously, the way my training had taught me to notice deviations from baseline behavior. The plate was the osso buco, the same dish I'd just recommended to Dominic. ***, before we go any further, I need to know something. What time is it where you are? Where are you watching from? Drop your city, country, and time in the comments below. Let's see how far this story travels. ***. My heart rate spiked as I watched Gianna's approach to the pass. Her hands were steadier. Now the trembling had stopped the moment she'd made her decision. Classic behavioral shift. Once people committed to significant actions, the anxiety often decreased, replaced by focused determination. She was carrying the osso buco toward table 14. I looked at Marcus. He was watching too, his expression carefully neutral. But I caught the slight tension around his eyes, the way his breathing had slowed and deepened, the micro-expression of anticipation mixed with dread. They were poisoning Dominic's food. The realization hit me with crystalline clarity. All the behavioral markers aligned. The pre-action, anxiety, the hushed conversations, the specific timing, the way Marcus had positioned himself to watch the outcome. The way Gianna's hands had steadied once she'd committed to delivering the plate. Every instinct screamed at me to mind my own business, to finish my shift and go home to my lively, cramped studio in Queens, where the most dangerous thing I faced was the stack of medical peace, bills still accumulating 18 months after my father's death. But I couldn't shake the image of Dominic taking that first bite. Couldn't ignore 3 months of him treating me with more respect than most customers showed their servers. Couldn't forget the night he'd stayed late to make sure I had a cab home when the subway had shut down. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe my psychology training was seeing malice in innocent coincidence. But what if I wasn't? I intercepted Gianna 3 feet from Dominic's table. "I'll take that," I said quietly, reaching for the plate with the smile I used for difficult customers. "Mr. Salvatore prefers when I serve his courses personally." Gianna's pupils dilated. Classic physiological response to unexpected interference. "I was told to deliver this one specifically." "By whom?" Marcus said. She caught herself, and I watched the micro-expression of fear flash across her features. She'd revealed too much. "I'll handle it," I repeated, taking the plate with gentle but absolute firmness. "Why don't you check on table 6? They've been waiting for drink refills." She hesitated, torn between whatever instructions Marcus had given her and the authority of a senior server. Finally, she nodded and retreated toward the bar, already pulling out her phone, calling someone, reporting that the plan had changed. I carried the osso buco to the kitchen, my pulse hammering so hard I was certain everyone could hear it. Set it down on the prep station with careful precision. "Something wrong with the dish?" Marcus asked, his voice too casual. "Customer requested a modification," I lied, meeting his eyes with the practiced neutrality my psychology training had taught me. "I'll take a fresh plate." His jaw tightened. "That plate is fresh, nevertheless." I held his gaze, watching the calculation happening behind his eyes. "I'll wait for a new one." For 3 heartbeats, we existed in a bubble of silent confrontation. Then Marcus nodded curtly and turned to the expo line, barking orders in Spanish. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and snapped a photo of the original osso buco. Then I carried it to the walk-in cooler, placed it on a back shelf behind the produce, and marked the location in my mind. Evidence. If I was right, this plate contained something that could kill Dominic Salvatore. When the new ossobuco emerged from the kitchen, this one prepared by Chef Andres himself, not Marcus, I carried it to table 14 with legs that felt disconnected from my brain. Dominic looked up as I approached, and I realized he'd been watching the entire exchange. Those dark eyes missed nothing. "Mr. Salvatore," I said quietly, leaning forward as if to adjust his silverware. My voice dropped to Desira, barely above a whisper. "Stay quiet and don't eat anything." The original dish was compromised. His hand stilled on his wine glass, those dark eyes sharpening with sudden, dangerous focus. For a heartbeat, the restaurant continued its oblivious hum around us. Conversations about stock portfolios and vacation homes. The clink of crystal. Someone's delighted laughter at a joke I couldn't hear. "Explain," he said, his voice so low I almost missed it. The line cook and new server, they've been exhibiting coordinated pre-action anxiety for the day, past 90 minutes. Elevated stress responses, guilt markers, focused attention on your table. The words tumbled out in a rush of technical terminology mixed with genuine fear. She tried to deliver your ossobuco. The behavioral patterns suggested intentional contamination. I intercepted it and secured it in the walk-in cooler for analysis. Dominic's expression didn't change, but something fundamental shifted in his posture. A coiling of muscles. A readiness that transformed him from elegant dinner patron to something far more dangerous. "You're certain?" he asked. I wasn't certain of anything except the rapid beating of my heart and the cold sweat breaking out across my palms. But 3 years of studying forensic psychology and criminal behavior had taught me to trust pattern recognition. 90% confidence, I said. All the behavioral markers align with pre-planned malicious action. He reached into his jacket slowly, carefully, and withdrew his phone. A few quick taps. Then he set it face down beside his plate. "Done." "What's done?" That ghost of a smile I'd seen before, sharp and predatory. "Insurance." What happened next unfolded with the precision of a surgical strike. Dominic's phone buzzed once, a response to whatever message he'd sent. Within seconds, 3 men in dark suits materialized from different areas of the restaurant. I hadn't even noticed them before, which should have terrified me more than it did. They moved with quiet efficiency toward the kitchen. Marcus never saw them coming. One moment he was plating another dish, the next he was face down on the stainless steel prep table, his arm twisted behind his back at an angle that made my stomach lurch. His Spanish curses echoed through the sudden silence of the kitchen. Gianna tried to run. She made it exactly 4 steps before disappearing behind a wall of expensive Italian wool and controlled violence. Her phone clattered across the tile floor. Screen, spider webbing on impact. The dining room barely noticed. A few customers glanced toward the kitchen with mild curiosity, probably assuming it was some staff drama. They had no idea they were witnessing something far more dangerous. Through it all, Dominic remained seated, calmly finishing his wine as if orchestrating tactical operations was as routine as ordering dessert. "We need to leave," he said quietly, standing and placing what looked like several $100 bills on the table. "Now, I can't just leave work. My shift isn't. Your shift is over." His hand found the small of my back, steering me toward the main entrance, with gentle but absolute authority. "Trust me when I say you don't want to be here when the authorities arrive to investigate what just happened." My legs felt disconnected from my brain as we walked through the dining room. Maria caught my eye from across the restaurant, her expression confused as she watched me leave with a customer mid-shift. I wanted to explain, to tell her I'd call later, but Dominic's pace never slowed. Outside, a black Mercedes waited at the curb, engine running. Not the kind of coincidence that happened in normal people's lives. "Get in," Dominic said, opening the rear door. Every rational thought in my head screamed warnings. This was how people disappeared. This was how normal lives ended and bodies turned up in the Hudson. But what choice did I have? I'd just witnessed what happened to people who tried to poison Dominic Salvatore, and I was pretty sure refusing his invitation would put me in a category I didn't want to be in. The interior smelled like leather and expensive cologne. Dominic slid in beside me, maintaining careful distance while somehow still dominating the space. The driver, a man built like a professional linebacker with graying temples, pulled away from the curb without a word. "Where are you taking me?" I asked, proud that my voice only shook slightly. "Somewhere safe while we sort this out." "Sort what out? I don't even know what just happened back there." Dominic studied me with those dark eyes, calculating something behind their depths. "You saved my life tonight, Sophie. That tends to complicate things." We drove through Manhattan's late-night streets in tense silence. I recognized the neighborhoods at first, familiar territory near my Queens apartment. But as we headed uptown, toward the Upper East Side, the scenery shifted to areas I knew only from movies and magazines about the wealthy elite. The safe house turned out to be a penthouse in a building that probably had a waiting list longer than I'd been alive. Armed men waited in the lobby, their presence transforming elegant surroundings into something that felt distinctly like a fortress. "This is temporary," Dominic assured me as we rode the private elevator to the 40th floor. "Just until we understand the full scope of tonight's events." The apartment was stunning, floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city, furniture that belonged in architectural magazines, art that I recognized from my college, humanities, classes, originals, not prints. But it was also clearly a place designed for security, rather than comfort. No personal touches, multiple exit routes visible, and the subtle bulges under the jackets of the two men who'd followed us up suggested this was more prison than refuge. "I need to call my job," I said, fishing for my phone. "Maria will be worried, and my manager, already handled." A woman appeared from what looked like a library, moving with quiet efficiency. Mid-30s, elegant in an understated way, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "I spoke with your manager 30 minutes ago," she said, her voice carrying the precise diction of expensive education. "You've developed severe food poisoning and won't be in for the next week." He was very understanding, especially after Mr. Salvatore's company made a generous donation to cover any inconvenience. I stared at her. "Who are you?" "Catherine Romano, Mr. Salvatore's executive assistant." She extended a perfectly manicured hand. "I've prepared the guest suite for you. There are clothes in your size in the closet. If you all need anything else, please let me know." "How do you know my size?" That same calculating look I'd seen from Dominic. "We're very thorough in our research, Miss Chen." The casual mention of research sent fresh chills through me. How much did they know? How long had they been watching me? And why did I suddenly feel like I'd stumbled into something far bigger than a simple poisoning attempt? Dominic had disappeared into another room and office, judging by the glimpse of multiple monitors and communication equipment I caught before the door closed. Catherine gestured for me to follow her down a hallway lined with what looked like original Rothkos. "You must have questions," she said as we walked. "About 1,000 of them. Mr. Salvatore will answer what he can tomorrow. For tonight, try to rest." It's been an eventful evening. The guest suite was larger than my entire apartment, decorated in calming grays and blues that should have been soothing but somehow weren't. Catherine had laid out clothes on the Amanus bed designer labels I recognized from window shopping I could never afford. "How did you know I'd be coming here?" I asked, fingering the soft fabric of a cashmere sweater. Catherine paused in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Salvatore is a man who plans for contingencies. He's been aware of you for some time, Miss Chen." "Aware of me how?" But she was already gone, leaving me alone with questions that multiplied faster than I could process them. ***. Hit subscribe if you can't stand people who poison others for money. Only traitors and cowards won't subscribe. ***. I didn't sleep. How could I? Every sound from the hallway made me jump. Every distant voice made me wonder if I was about to become another casualty in whatever war I'd stumbled into. By dawn, I'd worn a path in the expensive carpet from pacing. Catherine appeared with coffee and pastries around 7, her efficiency suggesting she dealt with traumatized houseguests before. "Mr. Salvatore would like to speak with you when you're ready," she said, setting the tray on a small table near the windows. "And if I'm not ready?" A slight smile. "Then he'll wait. But Miss Chen, the longer you wait, the more questions you'll have, and the fewer answers will satisfy you." She was right, of course. I'd spent the night constructing increasingly elaborate theories about who Dominic Salvatore was and what I'd gotten myself into. None of them were particularly comforting. I found him in the office, surrounded by monitors displaying what looked like security feeds from various locations around the city. He'd changed from his dinner attire into dark jeans and a black sweater, looking younger and somehow more dangerous in casual clothes. "Sleep well?" he asked without turning from the screens. "Did you expect me to?" "No, but I hoped." He swiveled to face me, those dark eyes conducting their usual assessment. "How much do you know about organized crime in New York, Sophie?" The use of my first name sent an unexpected flutter through my chest. "Only what everyone knows, that it exists, that people get hurt, that normal people try to stay as far away from it as possible. Smart policy. Unfortunately, no longer an option for you. Because I saved your life? Because you witnessed the Moretti family attempting to have me killed? And because your intervention allowed my people to capture 2 of their operatives alive." Dominic stood, moving, to pour coffee from a service I hadn't noticed. "Vincent Moretti will assume you're working with. That makes you a target." The casual way he delivered this death sentence made my knees weak. "For how long?" "Until Moretti is no longer a problem." "And how long will that take?" Dominic handed me a cup of coffee, his fingers brushing mine briefly. "That depends on how smart he is, and how quickly he realizes his war with my family was always going to end only one way. Family." The word carried weight I was only beginning to understand. I sipped the coffee prepared exactly how I liked it, 2 sugars and cream, which he shouldn't have known, and tried to process the implications. "What was in the food?" I asked. "The ossobuco Marcus tried to serve you?" "Ricin, extracted from castor beans, nearly undetectable in strongly flavored dishes. Symptoms: present as flu-like illness initially, making cause of death difficult to determine without specific toxicology." His expression was clinical, detached. "I would have been dead within 72 hours, painfully." My hand trembled, coffee sloshing dangerously close to the rim. "How do you know that's what it was?" "Because my people analyzed the plate you saved." Very smart thinking, by the way. "Preserving evidence." He gestured to one of the monitors, which displayed a laboratory report I couldn't quite read from this distance. Marcus confessed during questioning. Moretti paid him $50,000 to poison my food. Gianna was his girlfriend. She got the serving job, specifically to ensure the right plate reached my table. "Where are they now?" Something shuddered in his expression. "Being handled." I didn't ask what handled meant. Some part of me already knew. Some part of me didn't want confirmation. "Why would this Moretti want you dead?" "Territory. Power. The usual reasons men kill each other in my world." Dominic moved to the windows, staring out at the city awakening below. "Vincent Moretti controls the waterfront, shipping operations. I control restaurant supply chains and distribution networks. Our territories overlap." He decided elimination was more efficient than negotiation. "And now we respond, appropriately." The way he said appropriately sent chills down my spine. Saturday morning came with the harsh reality that my life had fundamentally changed overnight. I woke in sheets that probably cost more than my monthly rent, in a room that could house 3 families, guarded by men whose job was to ensure I never left without permission. The panic attack hit me before I was fully conscious. My chest constricted, air becoming impossible to draw into my lungs. The elegant bedroom, walls seemed to close in, transforming from sanctuary to prison cell. My hands shook as I gripped the expensive bedding, trying to ground myself in something tangible, while my mind spiraled through every worst-case scenario my psychology training had ever made me aware of. I was going to disappear, become another statistic, another missing person whose case would gather dust in some detective's filing cabinet. No one would even know where to start looking. "Miss Chen," Catherine's voice carried through the door, accompanied by a gentle knock. "I've brought breakfast." I forced myself to breathe slowly, counting to 4 on each inhale, holding for 4, exhaling for 6. The technique Dr. Martinez had taught me during grief counseling after Dad died, back when panic attacks were about medical bills and funeral arrangements, not about being held captive by organized criminals. "I'm fine," I called out, proud that my voice sounded relatively normal. "May I come in? Did I have a choice?" Everything about my situation was phrased as requests, but the armed guards outside made it clear that refusal wasn't really an option. Catherine entered carrying a silver tray laden with coffee, fresh fruit, and what looked like homemade pastries. She moved with the same quiet efficiency I'd noticed before, setting everything on the small table near the windows. "Mr. Salvatore had to leave early this morning," she said, pouring coffee into delicate porcelain cups. "Business matters requiring his attention." Business matters, a euphemism that could mean anything from board meetings to executions. "When can I go home?" Catherine's hands stilled for just a moment, the first crack in her professional composure I'd witnessed. "That depends on several factors currently outside our control." "You mean it depends on whether Vincent Moretti decides to kill me or not?" "Mr. Salvatore won't let that happen." The certainty in her voice should have been comforting. Instead, it reminded me that my survival now depended entirely on the whims of a man I barely knew. A man whose world operated by rules I couldn't begin to understand. I spent the morning pacing the penthouse like a caged animal. The apartment was stunning floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Manhattan, furniture that belonged in design magazines, artwork that probably cost more than most people made in a lifetime. But beauty couldn't disguise the fact that I was essentially a prisoner. Every door led to rooms I wasn't supposed to enter. Every window was 40 stories above the ground. Every exit was monitored by men who smiled politely, while making it clear that leaving wasn't an option. By afternoon, I'd worked myself into such a state of anxious energy that I decided to test the boundaries of my captivity. "I need some air," I told Catherine. "Maybe a walk around the building." Her expression remained perfectly neutral. "I'm afraid that's not possible at the moment." "Then maybe the lobby. Just to feel like I'm not completely trapped." "Miss Chen, I understand this is difficult, but—" "No, you don't understand." The words exploded out of me with more force than I'd intended. "You don't understand what it's like to have your entire life turned upside down because you tried to do the right thing. You don't understand what it's like to be told you're a target for murder because you warned someone about a poisoning attempt. And you definitely don't understand what it's like to be imprisoned in a golden cage by the same person you saved." Catherine absorbed my outburst without flinching, her composure intact. "You're right. I don't understand those specific circumstances. But I do understand being caught between impossible choices and dangerous people." Something in her tone made me look at her more carefully. Really look past the professional demeanor and expensive clothes. Her eyes held shadows that spoke of experiences she'd never share, of decisions that had cost her more than she'd ever admit. "How long have you worked for him?" I asked. 8 years. "And in those 8 years, how many people like me have you had to accommodate?" A slight smile touched her lips. "You're the first." That should have made me feel special. Instead, it made me feel like an experiment. Asterisk, asterisk, comment, protected, if you believe in defending those who can't defend themselves. Only. Moretti types would scroll past this. Asterisk, asterisk. Sunday brought my first escape attempt. I waited until I heard Catherine leave for what she called her weekly errands. Then made my move. The guards at the front entrance were positioned to watch for people coming in, not necessarily for residents going out. If I moved with confidence, dressed appropriately, maybe I could simply walk past them like I belonged there. I made it exactly 2 floors down in the elevator before it stopped between floors. The lights dimmed, then came back up. When the doors opened again, one of Dominic's men was waiting. "Miss Chen," he said politely, as if encountering me in an elevator between floors was perfectly normal. "Mr. Salvatore asked me to escort you back to the apartment." The shame of being caught trying to escape burned hotter than the fear. I'd acted like a frightened child instead of the educated woman I was supposed to be. But what choice did I have? Sit quietly and wait for someone to decide my fate? Dominic returned that evening, his presence filling the apartment with an energy that made my skin prickle with awareness. He'd changed from his morning suit into dark jeans and a navy sweater, looking younger and somehow more dangerous in casual clothes. "I hear you had an eventful day," he said, pouring himself a glass of whiskey from a crystal decanter. Heat flooded my cheeks. I needed some air. "And you thought wandering Manhattan alone while Vincent Moretti has a contract on your head was a good way to get it? I thought maybe I could go back to my normal life and pretend none of this happened." He turned to face me, those dark eyes conducting their usual assessment. "Your normal life ended Thursday night when you chose to warn me instead of minding your own business. So I'm being punished for doing the right thing? You're being protected because doing the right thing put you in the crosshairs of very dark, dangerous people." The rational part of my brain understood the logic. But the emotional part, the part that felt like a prisoner, despite the luxury surroundings, wanted to scream at the unfairness of it all. "Tell me about your father," Dominic said suddenly, the apparent non sequitur catching me off guard. "What about him?" "Catherine mentioned he passed away recently. The medical bills that forced you to take the Popliv waitressing job alongside your research work." I wrapped my arms around myself, the familiar grief settling over me like a heavy blanket. Heart attack. 18 months ago. 3 days in ICU before he died. The bills didn't stop with him. How much? That's not your concern. How much, Sophie? The use of my name again, like he was testing how it felt in his mouth. 38,000, give or take. He absorbed this information with a single nod. "And you're paying it off on a waitress's salary, while working on your doctorate. I don't have much choice. There's always a choice." He moved to the window, stared out at the darkening city. "You could have declared bankruptcy, walked away from the debt. That's not who I am." "No." He glanced back at me. "It's not. You honor your obligations even when they're destroying. That's rare." Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and something shifted in his expression. "Catherine will show you to dinner," he said. "I have business to attend to." He left before I could ask what kind of business required his attention at 8 o'clock on a Sunday night. I had a feeling I didn't want to know. That night, sleep eluded me completely. I lay in the expensive sheets, staring at the ceiling, processing everything that had happened in the past 48 hours, trying to reconcile the dangerous man who ordered tactical operations with the customer who'd always treated me with quiet respect. At 2 a.m, I gave up and padded to the kitchen in search of water. The apartment was dark except for the city lights filtering through the massive windows, creating patterns of shadow and illumination across the marble floors. I wasn't alone. Dominic stood at the kitchen island, fully dressed despite the late hour. Steam rose from 2 cups sitting on the granite counter, and the rich aroma of espresso filled the air. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked without turning around. "Too much to process." He handed me one of the cups. Perfect espresso in delicate porcelain. It's an old family recipe. My mother used to make it when I had nightmares. The gesture was so unexpectedly intimate that it caught me off guard. This wasn't the calculated crime boss or the controlled businessman. This was just a man sharing something precious from his past. We stood in comfortable silence, drinking coffee in the soft glow of the city lights. For the first time since Thursday night, I felt something other than fear or anger, something that might have been understanding. "The men who tried to poison you," I said quietly. "What happened to them?" Dominic was quiet for a long moment. "Do you want the truth?" "Always. Marcus is dead. Gianna is being held until we extract all the information she has about Moretti's operations. His voice carried no emotion, no regret. She'll likely face the same fate once she's no longer useful. I should have been horrified. Should have felt guilt for my role in their capture. Instead, I felt hollow, empty except for a strange, cold understanding that in Dominic's world, attempting murder had predictable consequences. Your mother, I said, changing the subject to something I desperately needed to understand. You said she made this coffee for you. What happened to her? Something shifted in his expression, the careful control slipping just enough to reveal old pain beneath. She was poisoned, he said finally. When I was 16, by someone we trusted. Someone who ate at our table every Sunday. The parallel to what had almost happened to him wasn't lost on me. Who? My uncle. My father's younger brother. Dominic's hand tightened on his cup. He'd been working with the Calabrese family for years, selling information, undermining my father's operations. We never suspected until it was too late. I'm sorry. She suffered for 4 days before she died. The doctors couldn't identify the poison until the autopsy. Some rare compound sourced from South America. His voice was clinical now, detached. It taught me never to trust anyone completely, and it taught me to recognize the signs of betrayal before they become fatal. Understanding dawned. That's why you need someone who can read people. Someone who can spot the behavioral markers that trained operatives try to hide. Your intervention Thursday night wasn't just good instincts, Sophie. You saw patterns that professional killers tried to conceal. That's not a skill you learn serving tables. I found myself studying his face in the dim light, the controlled expression that never quite concealed the pain underneath, the careful posture that spoke of constant vigilance, the way his eyes continuously swept the room even in his own home. You don't trust anyone, do you? Trust is a luxury I can't afford. That sounds like a lonely way to live. For a moment, something raw and honest flickered across his features. Loneliness is better than betrayal. I set down my cup and moved closer, close enough that I could smell cedar and something darker. What happened to your uncle? Dominic's smile in the darkness was sharp as broken glass. My father handled most of them when I turned 18. But that one, my uncle, that was mine. The admission should have terrified me. Instead, it helped me understand the man standing before me. Someone who'd watched his mother die from poison administered by family. Who'd learned at 16 that trust could be fatal. Someone not so different from the girl who'd watched her father's heart give out while insurance companies argued about coverage percentages. I'm sorry that happened to you, I said quietly. His hand came up, fingers brushing my cheek with unexpected gentleness. And I'm sorry about your father. Catherine told me the full story. How you worked 3 jobs to try to cover the ICU costs. How you had to choose between experimental treatments and keeping your apartment. You had me investigated. I have everyone investigated. But his thumb traced my cheekbone with something that felt less like calculation and more like genuine care. You've never asked for help, never complained, just worked yourself to exhaustion, honoring debts that weren't yours to pay. They were my responsibility. And now you're mine. The possessiveness in his voice should have alarmed me. Instead, it sent heat pooling low in my stomach. Dominic. He kissed me before I could finish the thought. Soft at first, questioning, his lips against mine, testing boundaries neither of us had acknowledged existed. I tasted espresso and something darker, more dangerous. When I didn't pull away, when my hands came up to grip his sweater, it deepened. His other hand found my waist, pulling me closer with careful attention to maintaining control. Heat flooded through me, erasing rational thought. This was Dominic Salvatore, the man who'd ordered deaths tonight, who controlled territories and commanded armies with whispered words, and I was kissing him in his kitchen while the city sprawled below us, oblivious. His phone buzzed violently in his pocket. We broke apart, both breathing hard. He pulled out the device, read the screen, and something dangerous crossed his expression. I have to go. There's a situation with Moretti's response to tonight. Be careful. He cupped my face with both hands, pressed his forehead to mine. We're not done with this conversation. No, I agreed. We're not. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with swollen lips and a racing heart. Asterisk, tap like if you believe in protecting the people who protect you. Only traitors and cowards would scroll past this. Asterisk. 3 days passed in strange limbo. Dominic spent most of his time handling whatever fallout had come from the poisoning attempt. I remained in the penthouse with Catherine as my constant companion, learning the rhythms of a world I'd never imagined being part of. Tuesday afternoon, Catherine appeared with news that made my blood run cold. There's something you need to see, she said, setting a manila folder on the living room table. With careful precision, inside were photographs. Crime scene photos from the look of the police tape and evidence markers. A man lay sprawled across what appeared to be a restaurant storage room, his face peaceful despite the obvious violence that had ended his life. Who is this? I asked, though something about the victim's features seemed familiar. Tommy Chen, age 28. He worked as a sous chef at Mafia, where you waitressed. Before Cielo d'Oro. My stomach dropped. Tommy. Sweet, ambitious Tommy who'd always snuck me extra family meal portions when I worked doubles. Who'd asked about my research and encouraged me to finish my doctorate even when the bills seemed insurmountable. Why are you showing me this? Catherine's expression remained carefully neutral. He was eliminated 3 days ago on Mr. Salvatore's orders. The folder slipped from my suddenly nerveless fingers. Photographs scattering across the paidas. Expensive rug. What? No, Tommy wouldn't. He was selling information about your previous employment history, your schedule patterns, your sister's contact information in Boston. Catherine's voice was clinical, detached. He provided Vincent Moretti with details that made you easier to target. I stared at the photos. Tommy's face smiling up at me from what looked like a staff ID photo, clipped to the file. Kind, encouraging Tommy who'd always remembered my birthday and asked about my father during his final months. He was just trying to make extra money, I whispered. Extra money that would have gotten you killed. Catherine knelt, gathering the scattered photographs. The information he sold was specifically about you, Miss Chen. Your address, your work schedules, even details about your sister's graduate program at MIT. That level of detail doesn't happen by accident. The room tilted. Tommy was dead because Dominic had decided his potential threat to me outweighed his right to live. A 28-year-old chef with culinary school loans and dreams of opening his own restaurant had been executed because he'd made a stupid decision about easy money. Where is Dominic? I asked, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. He had meetings this morning. He should return. I didn't wait for her to finish. I ran through the penthouse, searching every room until I found him. In his office, speaking quietly on the phone in Italian. He looked up when I burst through the door, taking in my disheveled appearance and obvious distress. I'll call you back, he said into the phone, then set it down with deliberate care. Sophie, what's wrong? Tommy Chen. Something shuddered in his expression, a careful blankness that confirmed everything. Catherine had told me. You saw the report. You killed him. Not a question. An accusation. I eliminated a threat to your safety. He was 28 years old. He was just trying to pay off student loans. Dominic stood, moving around the desk with that predatory grace that no longer seemed protective now. It felt dangerous in an entirely different way. He was selling information that would have led to your death or disappearance. His motivations don't change that fact. He didn't know what the information would be used for. He couldn't have understood. Ignorance doesn't excuse the consequences of his choices. I backed toward the door, suddenly desperate to put distance between us. You're talking about a person, not a business problem. Tommy had a family, friends, a life. And now, you still have yours. His voice carried no emotion, no regret. That's what matters. To you, maybe, but not to me. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Would you prefer I had let him continue providing intelligence to people who want to torture you for information about my operations? I would prefer you had found another solution. Maybe talked to him, paid him more than Moretti was offering, relocated him. Anything but murder. This isn't a negotiation, Sophie. In my world, threats are eliminated permanently. There are no second chances, no rehabilitation programs, no appeals processes. There's survival, and there's death. The cold certainty in his voice chilled me to the bone. This was the man I'd been starting to care about. Someone capable of ordering executions with the same casual efficiency most people used to order coffee. I can't do this, I said quietly. Can't do what? Be with someone who kills people I know, people I care about, people who endanger you. His jaw tightened. Tommy wasn't innocent, Sophie. He sold you, out for $5,000. That's what your life was worth to him. The words hit like a physical blow. I'm leaving. No, you're not. You can't keep me here against my will. I can't let you get yourself killed because you're too idealistic to understand reality. Then I guess we have a problem. I turned and walked out of his office, out of his penthouse, out of his world. Catherine made no move to stop me, though I caught her speaking urgently into her phone as I waited for the elevator. The guards in the lobby nodded politely as I passed, their expressions betraying nothing about whether they'd been ordered to let me go or stop me. By evening, I was on an Amtrak train heading toward Boston, watching New York disappear as darkness fell. My sister Rachel lived in a small apartment near MIT, working on her doctoral thesis in biomedical engineering. As far from Dominic's world as I could imagine, the 4-hour journey gave me plenty of time to think, to process what had happened, to question every decision I'd made since that first night at Cielo d'Oro. I'd saved a man's life and somehow become complicit in taking another's. I'd fallen in love because that's what it was. I could admit it now with someone whose moral compass operated by rules I couldn't accept. Rachel met me at South Station with questions in her eyes and enough wisdom not to ask them. Immediately. She'd inherited our mother's intuitive understanding of when someone needed comfort more than explanations. Bad breakup? She asked as we navigated the T toward her apartment in Cambridge. Something like that. But even as I settled into her spare bedroom, trying to convince myself I'd made the right choice, I couldn't shake the feeling that leaving New York had only made me more vulnerable, not safer. 2 days later, I discovered just how right that feeling had been. Boston was supposed to be my sanctuary. Rachel's apartment near MIT felt worlds away from Dominic's penthouse and the violence that had consumed my life in New York. For 2 days, I almost convinced myself I could disappear into academia and normal sisterly conversations about research methodologies and dissertation stress. I was making coffee Wednesday morning when Rachel's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and frowned. Unknown number, but she answered anyway. Hello? I watched her face change from mild annoyance to confusion to stark terror in the space of heartbeats. The phone slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering across the kitchen tile. Rach, what's wrong? They know about you. Her voice broke. Sophie? They said they're coming for both of us. Ice flooded my veins. Who said that? I don't know. The voice was wrong, threatening. They knew your name, knew you were here, knew about Dad's medical bills, even knew about my thesis advisor's name. She looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. They said if you didn't come with them willingly, they'd take me. Instead, the coffee mug slipped from my hands, ceramic exploding across the linoleum. Dominic had been right. Leaving New York hadn't made me safer. It had just put Rachel in danger too. Pack a bag, I said, my mind racing through possibilities. Right now, we need to leave. Sophie, what's going on? Who were those people? I'll explain later. Just pack whatever you can carry. The apartment door exploded inward, splinters of wood flying like shrapnel. 3 men in tactical gear poured through the opening, weapons drawn. moving with military precision that made my blood freeze. "Rachel Chen," the lead man said in heavily accented English, Eastern European. "Maybe Russian. You come with us." "No." I stepped in front of my sister, hands raised. "Take me. I'm the one you want." He smiled, revealing a gold-capped tooth. "We want you to watch, to understand consequences of betraying Moretti family." Before I could react, one of the other men had Rachel's arm twisted behind her back, a cloth pressed over her mouth and nose. She struggled for maybe 10 seconds before going limp in. His arms. 48 hours, Goldtooth said, turning his attention back to me. "You return to New York. You tell Salvatore we have his woman's sister. He brings what we want or she disappears. Forever. What do you want?" "Territory. Respect. Things your mafia boyfriend stole from Moretti organization." His smile widened. "And you? Moretti wants to know what makes you worth starting a war over." They were gone before I could process what had happened, leaving me alone in Rachel's destroyed apartment with the acrid smell of chemical sedatives lingering in the air. I called Dominic from Rachel's landline, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial the number Catherine had given me for emergencies. He answered on the first ring. "Dominic, they have Rachel." Silence for 3 heartbeats. When he spoke again, his voice carried the cold precision that meant someone was about to die. "Where are you?" "Boston. Cambridge. They said 48 hours. They want territory and respect, and my voice broke. "They want me. Send me the address. I'm already in the car." "Dominic, I'm sorry. I should have listened. We'll discuss your decision to run later. Right now, we focus on getting your sister back alive." He arrived 5 hours later with an entourage that transformed Rachel's quiet academic neighborhood into a staging ground for military operations. Black SUVs lined the streets, men in expensive suits speaking rapidly into earpieces, surveillance equipment being deployed with practiced efficiency. Dominic found me sitting on Rachel's couch, still in the clothes I'd slept in, staring at the blood on the carpet where she'd scraped her knee during the struggle. "Tell me everything," he said, settling beside me with careful distance. I recounted the morning's events in clinical detail, my psychology training helping me remember specifics that might be important, the accents, the timing, the equipment they'd used, even the particular chemical smell that suggested pharmaceutical-grade sedatives. "Moretti's hired Russian contractors," he said when I finished. "Viktor Kozlov's crew. They specialize in kidnapping and extraction. Can you get her back?" Something flickered in his expression, not quite vulnerability, but close. "I've never lost someone I was protecting. I won't start with your sister." The next 12 hours unfolded like a masterclass in organized crime operations. Dominic's team located Moretti's temporary base through surveillance, electronic intercepts, and what Catherine euphemistically called enhanced interrogation of local contacts. Rachel was being held in an abandoned warehouse in Southie, guarded by 8 men with automatic weapons and orders to kill her if they detected any rescue attempt. "Standard protocol," Dominic explained as we studied satellite images of the building. "They're expecting overwhelming force, so we give them the opposite: precision, psychology, using their expectations against them." He turned to me with an actioned expression I'd learned to recognize. "I need your expertise." "My expertise?" "Your ability to read behavioral patterns, to predict how people will react under extreme stress." His eyes held mine. "Russian contractors aren't like Italian family soldiers. They operate on different psychological principles, different motivations. You studied this." He was right. My doctoral research had covered cross-cultural criminal psychology, different recruitment methods, different loyalty structures, different responses to pressure and threat. "What do you need to know?" "How they'll react when we eliminate their perimeter security. Whether they'll kill Rachel immediately or try to use her as leverage. What kind of psychological pressure will make them make mistakes instead of following training." I found myself drawn into the tactical planning despite every rational instinct screaming that this was madness. But Rachel's life hung in the balance, and my academic knowledge might be the difference between her coming home or disappearing forever. Russian contractors are motivated by money more than loyalty, I explained as Dominic's team gathered around the surveillance photos. They're professionals, not ideologues. That makes them predictable in some ways, unpredictable in others. Explain. They'll follow their contract to the letter until they believe the contract is void. If they think Moretti can't pay them, or if they think they're all going to die anyway, they'll abandon their posts. I studied the warehouse layout, thinking through behavioral economics and game theory. We need to make them believe cooperation is more profitable than completion. Dominic nodded slowly. And Rachel? They won't kill her immediately. She's too valuable as leverage. But if they think the rescue is succeeding, if they realize they're losing, they might execute her to deny you the victory. I met his eyes. We need to make them think they're winning right up until they've already lost. Something shifted in his expression. This wasn't just academic analysis anymore. I was actively participating in planning a military operation against the people who'd taken my sister. There's something else you need to understand, Dominic said quietly. About Tommy Chen. My stomach clenched. What about him? He wasn't just selling general information about your schedule. He was providing detailed intelligence about Rachel, her address, her class schedule, her daily routines, the Russians. I have been planning this for weeks. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Tommy hadn't just put me at risk. He'd made Rachel a target. If I hadn't eliminated him, Dominic continued, they would have taken her weeks ago, possibly. Killed her after extracting whatever information she had about you. I stared at the warehouse photos spread across the table, seeing them with new understanding. Tommy's death hadn't just been about protecting me. It had been about protecting Rachel too. I understand now, I said quietly. In your world, hesitation means death for everyone we care about. Something fundamental shifted in my chest. Not quite forgiveness, but acceptance. The moral landscape of Dominic's world operated by rules I'd never wanted to learn. But ignoring those rules had nearly cost Rachel her life. What do you need me to do? His smile was sharp as a blade. Help me get your sister back, then help me end Vincent Moretti permanently. Over the next 8 hours, I found myself fully integrated into Dominic's team in ways I'd never imagined possible. My psychology background proved invaluable for predicting contractor behavior patterns, and my knowledge of Rachel helped plan approach routes that wouldn't trigger her panic responses. By nightfall, we had a plan that was audacious in its complexity and terrifying in its implications. One way or another, Dominic said as his team made final preparations. This ends tonight. I looked at him, really looked, and saw not just the dangerous crime boss or the careful protector, but the man who'd dropped everything to help save my sister. The man whose world I was choosing to enter. Not as a prisoner this time, but as a partner. Together, I said. His hand found mine, fingers intertwining with surprising gentleness. Together. The warehouse in Southie looked abandoned from the outside, crumbling brick, broken, windows, graffiti covering every surface. But Dominic's thermal imaging revealed 8 heat signatures inside, positioned exactly as I'd predicted based on standard contractor security protocols, and one smaller signature in the northwest corner. Rachel. Remember, I said into the comm system Dominic had insisted I wear. Russians respect strength and profit. Show them both, and they'll choose survival over loyalty to Moretti. Copy that, came the responses from various positions around the building. I wasn't going in with them, Dominic had been absolute about that, but I was watching from a in surveillance from 2 blocks away, monitoring behavioral patterns through hidden cameras his team had placed during reconnaissance. The operation began at exactly 11:30. Dominic's people didn't storm the building. Instead, they made their presence obvious. Vehicles, pulling up from multiple directions. Armed men taking positions with deliberate visibility, creating the appearance of overwhelming force while actually using minimal personnel. Through the cameras, I watched the contractors' reactions. Exactly as predicted, They didn't immediately execute Rachel. Instead, they moved into defensive positions, weapons trained on entrances, waiting for orders from their team leader. "They're calling Moretti," I reported, watching Goldtooth speak rapidly into his phone. "Look at," his body language, shoulders tight, elevated stress. "Moretti isn't giving them the answers they want." "Meaning?" Dominic's voice crackled through my earpiece. "Meaning he didn't plan for you to respond this quickly with this much force. He's scrambling." They can hear it in his voice. That's when Dominic's people made their move. Not through the entrances the contractors were watching, but through a maintenance tunnel that connected to the building's basement. The same kind of service access I'd noticed at Cielo d'Oro. Old buildings always had them. I watched Goldtooth's expression change when he realized Dominic's team was already inside. Confusion. Then calculation. Then, exactly as I'd predicted, self-preservation. "They're surrendering." I breathed into the calm. "Look," Goldtooth just lowered his weapon. "He's telling his team to stand down." The extraction took 4 minutes. 4 minutes of careful negotiation where Dominic offered the contractors a choice: walk away with their lives, or die protecting a client who clearly hadn't paid them enough for this level of risk. They chose survival. Rachel stumbled out of the warehouse, supported by 2 of Dominic's men, drugged but alive. She collapsed into my arms the moment they brought her to the van, sobbing against my shoulder. "I've got you," I whispered, holding her tight. "You're safe now. I've got you." Over her head, I met Dominic's eyes. He was blood-spattered and dangerous looking, but his expression softened when he saw us together. "Thank you," I mouthed. He nodded once, then turned to deal with the contractors who'd chosen cooperation over loyalty. I had a feeling Moretti was about to receive a very different kind of message than he'd been expecting. *** comment, justice if you believe in protecting family at any cost. Only Moretti types wouldn't. Comment, ***. We returned to New York the following day. Rachel came with us. Dominic had been insistent that she stay under his protection until the situation with Moretti was resolved. She was still processing what had happened, still trying to understand the world I'd stumbled into. "He really cares about you," she observed one afternoon while Dominic was in a meeting. We were sitting in the penthouse living room, drinking tea Catherine had prepared. "I can see it in the way he looks at you. Like you're the most important thing in his world. It's complicated. Love usually is." She studied me carefully. "Do you love him?" Did I? I thought about the past 2 weeks, the fear and anger and moral conflict, but also the way Dominic had dropped everything to save Rachel. How he valued my expertise. How he'd kissed me in his kitchen like I was something precious. "Yes," I said quietly. "I think I do. Then the rest is just details. If only it were that simple." Thursday night, exactly 2 weeks after the poisoning attempt, Dominic asked me to accompany him to dinner. "Where?" I asked. "Cielo d'Oro. We're meeting with Moretti to discuss terms." My stomach dropped. "You want me there?" "I need you there." His eyes held mine. "You see things others miss. If Moretti's planning another move, you'll spot the tells before anyone else." So I found myself back at the restaurant where this had all started, wearing a designer dress Catherine had procured and feeling distinctly out of place among the crystal and candlelight I used to serve. Maria did a double take when she saw me enter with Dominic. Her expression shifted from confusion to understanding to something that might have been pride. She'd figured out who Dominic was. Weeks ago, Maria always knew more than she let on. Vincent Moretti was already seated at a corner table when we arrived. Mid-50s, silver-haired, with the kind of cold eyes that had seen too much violence to be shocked by anything. "Salvatore," he greeted Dominic with professional courtesy. Then his gaze landed on me. "And this must be the girl who's caused so much trouble." "Miss Chen saved my life," Dominic said, his hand settling possessively on the small of my back. "That's hardly trouble. Depends on your perspective." Moretti gestured to the empty seats. "Please, let's discuss how." we move forward from this unfortunate situation. The dinner was a masterclass in veiled threats, disguised as polite negotiation. Moretti proposed new territorial boundaries, compensation for the misunderstanding with the poisoning attempt, even suggested a potential alliance against families encroaching from Philadelphia. But I was barely listening to the words. I was watching the people. Moretti had brought 2 men with him, bodyguards positioned at nearby tables. Standard. Protocol. What wasn't standard was the 3rd man I recognized from my first night back at work. One of the senior servers, Antonio, who'd been with Cielo d'Oro for years. He was exhibiting the same behavioral markers I'd seen in Marcus and Gianna. The elevated stress responses, the repetitive self-soothing gestures, the way his attention kept drifting to our Weiss table with an intensity that didn't match his supposed focus on his other customers, and he kept glancing toward the kitchen, specifically toward the expo line where Chef Andres was plating dishes. My blood turned cold. They were trying again. I leaned close to Dominic, pretending to adjust my napkin. The server, Antonio, 3rd table from the bar. He's showing the same pre-action markers as the original attempt. Dominic's hand stilled on his wine glass. You're certain? 95%. And he keeps looking at the kitchen. At the expo line, I watched Antonio's approach pattern. He's going to try to serve you directly, probably claiming it's a gesture of respect for an important guest. Moretti's backup plan, Dominic said quietly, in case the negotiation didn't go his way. What do we do? His smile was cold. We let him try. Before I could protest, Antonio appeared at our table carrying 3 plates the entrees we'd ordered. His hands were steady, his expression professionally pleasant, but I caught the micro-expression of determination mixed with fear. Signore Salvatore, he said with rehearsed deference. Chef Andres prepared your branzino. Personally. He placed the plate in front of Dominic with a flourish. I watched Dominic's hand move to his fork, watched him cut into the fish, watched him bring it halfway to his mouth before setting it down with deliberate care. Antonio, Dominic said conversationally, how much did Moretti pay you? The server's face went white. I don't. Ricin again? Or did you choose something different this time? Dominic's voice never rose, stayed perfectly controlled. Maybe something faster acting, given that the first attempt failed? Antonio's hands started trembling. The plate he was still holding clattered against the table. 20,000, he whispered. My daughter needs surgery. The insurance won't cover. So you chose to kill me instead of asking for help. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Dominic gestured, and 2 of his men materialized from positions I hadn't noticed. You made yours. Now you live with the consequences. What happened next unfolded with the same precision as the first night. Antonio was escorted quietly through the kitchen and out the back entrance. Moretti's bodyguards tried to intervene, but found themselves outmaneuvered by Dominic's people who'd been positioned throughout the restaurant, and Moretti himself sat frozen, watching his backup plan crumble with the dawning realization that he'd fundamentally miscalculated. You brought her to read my people, he said, looking at me with something between respect and hatred. You knew I'd try again. I knew you'd be predictable, Dominic corrected. Sophie just confirmed it. He stood, buttoned his jacket with casual precision. Here's what's going to happen, Vincent. You're going to retire. Immediately. Transfer your territories to me, or divide them among the other families, I don't care which. But you're done in New York. And if I refuse? Dominic's smile was sharp as a blade. Then I'll show you exactly what happened to everyone who's tried to kill me. And trust me, you don't want that demonstration. Moretti absorbed this for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I'll need time to arrange. You have 48 hours. Dominic took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. After that, my offer expires and the consequences become much less pleasant. We left him there, sitting alone at his table, the weight of his defeat settling over him like a shroud. Outside, in the cool night air, I finally let myself breathe. You used me as bait, I said. I used your expertise to protect both of us. He pulled me close, his hands gentle on my waist. And it worked. Moretti's finished. You're safe. Rachel's safe. What about Antonio? His daughter really does need surgery. I'll handle it. The surgery will be covered. But Antonio's employment in my city is over. His expression softened slightly. I'm not completely without mercy, Sophie. Just selective about who receives it. That night, we made love in his penthouse bedroom with the city spread out below us like a glittering promise. His hands were reverent on my skin, his voice rough with emotion when he whispered my name. I love you, he said against my throat. I didn't want to, didn't plan to, but I love you anyway. I pulled him closer, felt his heart beating against mine. I love you too. Even though you're dangerous and complicated, and you do terrible things. Especially because of that? Maybe a little. His laugh was genuine and warm. Then he kissed me again, and everything else fell away. Except this, the two of us choosing each other despite every logical reason not to. Asterisk, asterisk. Tap like. If you believe real love means accepting someone completely flaws, dangers, and all. Only the judgmental scroll past this. Asterisk, asterisk. 2 years had transformed everything, yet nothing had changed at all. I stood in the conference room of Salvatore Security Consulting, watching 6 candidates squirm under my psychological evaluation. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd gone from serving food to crime bosses to psychologically profiling potential organizational members, all while maintaining the fiction that I ran a legitimate corporate consultancy. Mr. Patterson, I said, addressing the youngest candidate, your micro-expressions during the known loyalty assessment suggest deception. Specifically, involuntary eye contact breaks and increased blink rate when discussing hypothetical conflicts of interest. The 26-year-old shifted uncomfortably, his hands betraying the nervous energy I'd learned to recognize in people hiding secrets. Behind the one-way glass, I knew Dominic was watching, evaluating my assessment alongside his own instincts about which candidates could be trusted. Tell me about the gambling debts, I continued, noting how his pupils dilated at the direct question. 4 of the 6 would be eliminated based on psychological risk factors I'd identified. The other 2 would join the Salvatore organization in various capacities, legitimate security consulting, and what Catherine delicately termed specialized operations. My phone buzzed with a text from Dominic. Asterisk. Impressive as always. Dinner at home tonight. Dr. Reeves, appointment at 4. Asterisk. I touched my still flat abdomen reflexively. 4 months pregnant and barely showing, despite the morning sickness that had plagued me for weeks. Dr. Reeves assured us everything was progressing perfectly. But Dominic's protective instincts had shifted into overdrive since we'd confirmed the pregnancy. The Salvatore restaurant empire had grown from the single location where we'd met to 15 establishments throughout New York and Boston. Each served dual purposes legitimate, businesses that employed communities and served excellent food, while also functioning as secure meeting locations for Dominic's less legal enterprises. I'd become indispensable to the operation, not as Dominic's wife or the future mother of his child, but as a professional whose expertise in behavioral analysis had prevented 4 attempted infiltrations by law enforcement and identified 3 potential traitors before they could cause damage. Dr. Salvatore, Patterson said, using the title I'd earned when I'd finally finished my doctorate last year. I can explain about the gambling. No need, I interrupted, making notes in his file. Acknowledging the debt shows integrity. Lying about it would have been disqualifying. Your profile suggests you're motivated by family loyalty, rather than personal gain, which makes you suitable for client relations rather than security operations. The distinction mattered in Dominic's world. Client relations meant interfacing with legitimate businesses. Security operations meant being trusted with family secrets that could destroy everything if revealed. After the evaluations concluded, I retreated to my office, a space that straddled the line between legitimate psychology practice and criminal consulting. My doctorate diploma hung on the wall alongside certifications in crisis negotiation and behavioral threat assessment. professional credentials that provided perfect cover for my real work. Catherine appeared with my afternoon tea. The Brooklyn territory integration is complete, she reported with her usual efficiency. Revenue projections for Q4 are exceeding expectations by 40%. I nodded, reviewing the reports that told two stories. One for tax authorities showing healthy profits from legitimate security consulting. Another for Dominic detailing the actual revenue streams that funded our lifestyle. Any behavioral concerns with the new hires? Two junior analysts at the Wall Street office show signs of potential substance issues. Recommended monitoring rather than immediate termination. Smart. Firing creates resentment. Monitoring lets us intervene if needed or gather intelligence if they become compromised. The doctor's appointment confirmed what we already knew. Our daughter was developing. Normally, with a due date in early February. Dominic's hand never left mine during the ultrasound, his usual composure cracking slightly when the technician pointed out tiny fingers and toes. "Have you decided on names?" Dr. Reeves asked. "Sophia," Dominic said immediately. "After my mother." I squeezed his hand, understanding the significance. Naming our daughter after the woman whose death had shaped his entire worldview was both tribute and promise that this child would grow up protected in ways his mother never was. That evening, we sat in our private study in the townhouse we'd bought in the West Village, reviewing security reports from the training facility Dominic had established in a converted warehouse in Queens. What appeared to be a corporate leadership center actually served as advanced training for organizational members, teaching everything from defensive tactics to digital security to the kind of behavioral analysis I'd pioneered. "The Martinez team graduated last week," Dominic reported, showing me files on 3 candidates who'd completed the program. "They'll be managing the Boston expansion." I reviewed their psychological profiles, noting the markers that suggested loyalty, intelligence, and the particular kind of adaptability required for success in Dominic's world. "They'll do well." I recommended them personally. "I know. You're never wrong about people." Our wedding had been small, just family and close associates, held in a private ceremony at a villa in Tuscany. Rachel had been my maid of honor, her own recovery from the kidnapping, complete enough that she'd finished her doctorate and accepted a position at Stanford. She understood, if she didn't entirely approve, the choices I'd made. "I have something for you," Dominic said, producing a small velvet box from his desk drawer. Inside was a bracelet platinum with small diamonds, elegant enough for any occasion. But I knew it contained GPS tracking accurate to within 3 feet, waterproof, and with a panic button disguised as a clasp. "It's beautiful," I said, meaning it despite understanding its dual purpose. "And functional. The battery life is 18 months. I put it on immediately, appreciating how it complemented the wedding ring that had replaced my simple band 6 months earlier. Everything in our life served multiple purposes: beauty and function, legitimate business and carefully controlled power, love and strategic partnership. The townhouse we called home was a sanctuary in the chaos of the city. 5 stories of restored, 19th century elegance, surrounded by security that was invisible but absolute. But inside those walls, we'd created something that felt remarkably normal. Dominic cooked elaborate Italian meals on weekends. I maintained a small rooftop garden where I grew herbs for the restaurants. We read together in the evenings, discussing everything, from behavioral psychology to business strategy to the future we were building for our daughter. My consulting practice had grown beyond Dominic's organization, attracting clients from corporate security firms, law enforcement agencies, and even other families seeking psychological evaluation services. The reputation I'd built as Dr. Sophie Salvatore, specialist in behavioral threat assessment, provided perfect cover for my real work while generating substantial legitimate income. The medical debt that had haunted me for years was gone, paid off with Dominic's first signing bonus when I'd officially joined his organization. $38,000 that had felt like an anchor around my neck, eliminated with a single check and a quiet conversation about how family took care of family. I'd cried in his arms that night. Cried for my father who died trying to survive a system designed to profit from desperation. Cried for the girl I'd been, working 3 jobs and still drowning. Cried with relief that I'd never have to make those impossible choices again. 6 months remained until Sophia's arrival. 6 months to finalize the succession planning that would eventually transition Dominic from operational control to strategic oversight. The empire we were building would someday be hers, legitimate businesses backed by the kind of power and protection only a true family could provide. I stood at the window of our bedroom, watching the sun set over Manhattan, feeling Sophia move restlessly inside me. In the distance, lights were coming on in the training facility where tomorrow's candidates would learn the skills necessary for success in our world. Dominic appeared behind me, his arms circling my waist with practiced care, his hands settling protectively over our growing child. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly. I thought about the woman I'd been 2 years earlier. Frightened, naive, convinced that moral absolutes could govern complex realities. That Sophie Chen would have been horrified by the choices I'd made, the world I'd embraced, the man I'd married. But that Sophie had been drowning. Alone. Constantly afraid of the next bill, the next crisis, the next impossible decision. This Sophie doctor, Sophie Salvatore, had power, had purpose, had someone who valued her, intelligence as much as anything else, had built something meaningful from the wreckage of her old dreams. "None," I said, and meant it completely. Our reflection in the window showed what we'd become. A powerful man and his equally powerful wife. Partners in every sense of the word. Building an empire that would last generations. Sophia kicked as if in approval, already part of the family business that would someday be her inheritance. Outside our sanctuary, New York hummed with activity. Unaware that significant portions of its security industry, its restaurant networks, and its behavioral consulting services were controlled by the couple standing at this window, planning a future that balanced legitimate success with the kind of influence that could only be built on carefully controlled power. 2 years ago, I'd saved a man's life by noticing what others missed. In return, he'd given me everything I'd never known I wanted. Not just wealth or security, though those were nice, but partnership, respect, the freedom to use my skills for something that mattered. And love, complicated, dangerous, absolute love that had transformed us both. "Ready for the rest of our lives?" Dominic asked, his lips brushing my temple. I leaned into him. Felt his steady heartbeat against my back. "With you, always." From invisible waitress to the woman whose expertise protected an empire. From drowning in debt to building generational wealth. From alone to loved beyond measure. This was my life now. Chosen, deliberate, mine. And I was finally, completely free.